I had no idea. Like, I thought I was like this stoic person who didn't have any feelings, and like everybody else was crazy because they were all like emotional and like, and I would think I was the better person because I would like keep my emotions at bay and reject, disown, deny all of them. And then I had a seizure, like based off of repressed emotion.
Welcome to the Reality Therapy Podcast, where the truth will set you free.
Welcome. I'm here today with Kristen, who's a Master's of Counseling student with a addiction focus. We've had some interesting interactions on X, and I wanted to have a public conversation so we could hear more about your experience. So welcome, Kristen.
Thanks, Ryan. It's nice to actually finally meet you.
Yes, absolutely. So give me a little bit about your background, educational, work background. What made you interested in pursuing this path?
Yeah, sure. So I originally went to, I got a bachelor's in biology because I wanted to become a doctor. And then I was like, doctors spend zero time with patients. I don't like that. So then I switched, or like after I graduated, I went into an 11-month bachelor's of nursing. And I was there was like 40 people in our class, and it was like psych, right? I only wanted to do psych. Everyone thought I was crazy. But we graduated. I worked 3 years on inpatient psych and then 4 years on inpatient detox. And then I was also moved to the emergency room because in Pennsylvania and Pittsburgh, they only have one ER in the entire city where you can come in and get like a detox evaluation. And like, that was me. And of course they like would put all the alcoholics in chairs. They never got rooms, and they're like blowing like a 0.37. You would never notice except for the smell. They're like, good to see you again, and they'd be trying to run out like with their cigarettes with a point, with that high of a thing. And so I would have to like trick them. God, what cigarettes do you have? Oh, Pall Mall's cool. And then I'd like put them in a security thing, seal it up, and like run away. And then I worked at a inpatient detox rehab in Buffalo, and I was getting my doctorate to become a nurse practitioner, but right around COVID. And then I was like, I saw the scams going on with the Suboxone thing, and I was like, I can't be the one prescribing this. Like, I just can't do it. So I had my son in 2020, and he was born with all kind of medical things. So I stayed home with him because Colorado, the bonus of blue state is they paid me his mom. And then I just started reading everything. Like, I wanted to go on the side of therapy. So I applied to MSU Denver and applied there and started in the fall. But the last time I was in school was 2017. It's so different.
So first thing I wanted to say, my work background is in addiction treatment, and you have several years experience working in a detox and having to negotiate with people who are under the grips of alcoholism or drug addiction. It is a unique experience that not many people have. And I feel like you having that, you've probably had a more difficult kind of face-to-face client challenge than a lot of licensed therapists have had. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's why I look around the classroom and I'm like, you're going to get hit. You're going to get hit. You're going to get hit. One girl was like, what if they start yelling at me? I get triggered by yelling. Can I just leave the session? No. What? What if I don't want anybody court ordered? What? Who do you think's coming to you? I was like, what? Okay.
Yeah, I love people. It's like their first time dealing with like a recovering alcoholic. So he lied to me. No, really?
My was if they say they drink like 3 to 4 beers a day, I multiply by 3. So
Yeah.
like, make it a case. Let's just be honest here. And they're like, you know me well.
Yeah. So, you got into this program and you said it's been a little while since you've been in kind of formal education. I know for me, I dropped out of school in 2008 and went back to finish in 2020. And the difference was jarring for me,
Yes.
culture-wise. I'm wondering what you see on campus.
Oh my God, I try not to be there ever. But like even in our own classrooms, well, so first off, you get those emails about, have you been victimized? Tell me about your microaggressions you experienced. I almost wanted to put one on my social justice teacher because I was like, he was discriminating against me because I'm white. But it was like completely different. Like I've never, like even in my doctorate, in my nursing program, of course we have the culture class. It's always like the first class that you do. And in Pittsburgh, they just like threw you in the hood. They're like, go be respectful and interface. Worked out great, And then Like now we're in school and it's like the textbook. I'm so confused. Like I'm like, well, since when is this offensive? Since when is this offensive? Since when is this offensive? Why are we teaching our therapists like that? There's 27 genders. Why are we like? Why is that even not even allowed to be questioned? The big thing was in like our cultural social justice class was like perpetuate the victim mentality, the narrative over and over and over again. And I'm like, there's one other kid in our entire program, and I'm like, what's going on? Like, and everybody else though has kind of just graduated or like recently graduated or works in like whatever's happening since 2020. I have no idea, but works in like a situation where they have to like co-sign these delusions. And so like what I've noticed is like I'd bring like Thomas Sowell books to class and be like, listen, it's not all about like, because he was trying to advocate that social justice equals cultural competency. And I'm like, no, I don't. I did. I think I got kicked out of class that day. And then for the next day, I brought like social justice fallacies. Thomas Sowell.
I have that one.
Yeah. And I was like, So, but if you ever tried to, like, it was just me and this other kid who's like 45. So he's older. He hasn't been in school in a minute either. Against these like younger kids that are like maybe like 23. They've been in the indoctrination since BLM kind of thing. And when like we're talking, so like, the first 5 weeks we spend on like lack of substance abuse, blah, 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 whatever. And like, it was just like, there was more pages on why the white man caused this problem, why white people are literally directly the problem, like the cause for anybody, any person of color, any ethnicity to be using drugs. I was like, no, like, I just didn't agree with that. And especially like, I have a teacher that's like, I don't like to call Native Americans tribes. I'm like, they do. They prefer you call them by their tribal name. They prefer you call it Lakota. They prefer, like, I grew up near the Finger Lakes, so I'm like, try calling somebody from the Senecas Native American. They'll hit you. They'll be like, you're the Native American. We are the Seneca people.
It's so bizarre because the whole thing is you have to respect these people's culture and where they come from and everything like that. And then it's like, no, let me tell you how you're supposed to identify. It's like,
right.
You're Hispanic, you're Latinx. No, listen to me, the good white savior, tell you how you need to describe yourself,
Yeah, I had no idea what virtue signaling was because I've been like, not like after COVID, like, after like, I don't know, maybe like May, like I gave like 2 months of myself to the news, right? Because like I was like just about to have a baby and like I'm like, oh my God, what if I have this C-section and they're gonna like leave dad out and all that kind of other stuff. And then I was like, never watching the news again. And then I picked up like this, in like September because I was like, what is happening in school? Like, how is this real life? How are we learning that we can't use the word black, so we can't tell, oh, that's a black person. What?
Really?
Yeah, black's not allowed.
So in my program, they said you can't say African American, you have to say black.
Well, we have to say African American.
That's weird. There's no standard protocol.
No, none whatsoever. So it's like, because we have like the head of our department is like a beautiful black chick. Like, she's just beautiful. And so I was like, oh, is that the black woman that came and spoke with us? We don't use the word black. That's African American. I'm like, since when? Have you talked to black people?
Yeah.
Like, the thing is that they're very under like represent. They're just not, they don't live in Denver anymore.
Okay.
Like, they gentrified it, pushed them out, whatever.
Yeah.
And so like, there's literally like the only place you can find black people is like Cocaine Anonymous. Like,
I feel like a lot of these, you get in these circles and it's fairly affluent, very well educated, mostly white people. And the marginalized are mostly theoretical to them. They're not like actual people in their lives.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I had like, our teacher was, you wouldn't even know he's Hispanic or he's from Mexico. You wouldn't know anything. But he, of course, would always have to be like, he would talk about closure, right? And like how you don't want to monopolize a thing with another client. I will never, it's going to struggle for me to go from patient to client. And I get yelled at every time. Then he'll be like, yeah, that's the one thing you don't want to do. And then he'll go on this long 20-minute tirade about how he is from Mexico. Like his family is Mexican and he has to register as a Mexican American. I'm like, says who? Like, says who? He's like, oh, that's just how the world sees me. I'm like, I didn't even know you're Mexican.
Yeah. It reminds me, I was in my counseling the culturally diverse class, and my professor was a Hispanic woman who identifies as Chicana Latinx, and there was a woman from Mexico in the class, and the professor's talking to this woman, and she says, how are you oppressed as a Latinx person? And the woman's like, what are you talking about? She goes, I'm not Latin anything, I'm just Mexican. And she goes, second of all, I'm not oppressed. Back in Mexico, I have a maid. And she goes, maybe my maid's oppressed. Maybe that's why she came to the U.S. to get, better wages. And I was like, the whole class just got debunked in this one little interaction.
I wish everyone was screaming at us being like, no, this isn't victim narrative there. Like, I'm like, I'm like, shouldn't we empower them? Like, shouldn't it be like, no, these are all just noise that's telling you what you can't do and to make you feel oppressed. But systemically, there is no law that says a Black person can't do exactly what a white person can't do. So when we keep talking about systemic, I'm always like very confused. And they go back to like slavery. I'm like, okay, but it's 2024, now 2025. Like, why is post-traumatic slave syndrome still being diagnosed?
We had a guest speaker talk about post-traumatic slave, and the symptoms are literally anything that could go wrong with you.
Yes.
Like anything bad in your life.
Anytime you don't get a job, anytime you don't, you get a speeding ticket, it's because
anxiety, depression, like poor school performance, literally anything is post-traumatic slave syndrome.
Yeah, and when we pointed out, like, hey, did you know that like a lot of Black people own slaves? Actually, I think more Black people own slaves. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that, but I know that they owned a lot of slaves. And I'm like, and slavery has been around since the dawn of time. I was like, in America, it's the first time we stopped slavery. We were the first country to stop it, or nation, or whatever you want to call it back then. And I'm like, but it's not going on now. You're wrong, because there's a study that shows Black names, if they apply for jobs, don't get it. I'm like, that study was debunked.
Yeah, it was. One of the guys who debunked it was a Black scholar, Wilfred Riley.
Yeah. Like, that's not true. And now, like, if anything, with the DEI for those last 4 years, if it's going to, it looks like it's collapsing, thank God. But like, if it was you or me with higher skills, higher education, whatever else, and anybody else that's not white, doesn't matter, they would get it.
Unless they're Asian.
Yes, they don't get
it. Asians get a lot of discrimination.
Yeah, Asian and their model minority mid.
Yeah.
And that was the one chapter of our book where it like couldn't blame it on race and discrimination. So they had to go into family values, kids with their friend group. I'm like, yeah, this is like what it should look like. How maternal warmth is, how friend groups are, antisocial beliefs, like depression in the actual kid that's reporting this. Whereas everything else was just, well, Black people use drugs for race and discrimination. Well, Latinx used for race and discrimination.
Maybe they're getting high because they're so frustrated you keep calling them Latinx.
I know. I'm like, and then there's one chick in our class that her family's been here for 4 generations, and she's like, I call myself Mexican. I'm Mexican. I'm like, you're not Mexican. You're like 4th gen here.
It's like people who their family came here in the mid 1800s and they're like, yeah, I'm Irish. It's like, but are you really though? Like, at some point, like, when do you start becoming primarily American?
Right. When does the American set in? Like, our teacher's been here for like 30 years. I'm like, so when does American set in instead of like, you're the one who's self-proclaiming you're Mexican American, then complaining about it.
Yeah.
You go, like, I have to register as Mexican American. I've never seen that on us. It actually gives you a bonus point if you are.
Yeah.
Like, that's the whole point. It's like, oh, yes, I'm not white. Woohoo. And then, like, you get separated in 2 different piles.
So I feel like people like you and I who come from an addiction, alcoholism background, treating that type of population, the whole victim mentality is particularly jarring for us because victimhood is such a consistent theme with people with addiction. The reason I'm drinking is because of my wife or because of my boss. And breaking that victim mentality and getting them to take personal responsibility and empowering them is so crucial to their recovery. And then you get into these spaces where you say, no, we're not trying to empower them. We're trying to reinforce the victim narrative. It's shocking to me, at least.
Yeah, and that was like our main. I mean, I'm in recovery. I'll be picking up 5 years in
Congrats.
February 1st, so very soon.
Congrats.
But yeah, so like there's nobody that there's only my buddy, the 45-year-old. Him and I are cool. He's the only one that's like there's probably one other kid who was an alcoholic, but one of those guys that I voted for my daughter to have an abortion kind of thing. So, but him and I are like, with addicts, they will blame. I'm like, as an addict, I would blame everyone. My mom, my dog, this, that, whatever. Everybody's fault but my own. I'm not an addict. So in Colorado, what's even funnier, not funnier, it's actually scarier, is that they have like, what state do you live in?
Texas.
Texas. So do they have like a Texas board of addiction, blah, blah, blah?
I mean, they have like a LCDC board, an LPC board. I'm not sure if they have anything specifically for addiction. I don't know.
They probably do, but it's probably not as annoying.
Yeah.
Ours is called like CAP, CAAP, and it's like Colorado Addiction, something professional, blah, blah, blah. And so they have these like monthly or bi-monthly meetings in which they discuss like lobbying and this and that and what they've seen in the field. And it's like people from the DOC and this and whatever. They wanted to change. I'm not even kidding. They want to change substance use disorder to pattern disruption behavior or something like that. Harmful pattern repetition or something. And I'm like,
I love it because so much of this narrative is we have to respect people, who the way they describe themselves, the way they describe their own identity. And if you go to any Cocaine Anonymous meeting in the country, people are like, yeah, I'm a junkie. And then you go into academia, it's like, it's person with substance use disorder. They have to sanitize it so much in a way that's completely unrelatable to people who actually have addiction.
Right. And like for me, I didn't get clean for what? Like, so I started using 2027 to study from because, and then I didn't finally get 100% clean until I could be like, I am an addict. Like I kept blaming everyone else. I was like, it's this person. It's the people I'm using with. They just don't know how to stop. They're just jealous that I can use Monday, Thursday, and Saturday, and they can't. Like, and that was my whole spiel. Like, I'm not actually addicted. Like, but I just, no. It wasn't until I like had to own I am an addict. And like the point of meetings when you say, hello, I'm an addict, or my name is blah, I'm an addict, is to just remind yourself, hey, you're still an addict, buddy. Like, and so if we're removing addict, so we removed addict, put it with substance use disorder. If we're removing substance disorder, putting it with some compulsive behaviors, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no one's going to get clean. And then CAP also recommended, we want to get away with really aiming for abstinence. And we want to go for maybe like them using like 2 to 3 times a week. I'm like, that's never going to happen. And
yeah.
It's asking for an overdose for somebody on opiates. Like, get sick for 3 days, then you can use. You're going to go hard on day whenever you can use.
I understand some of the, what is it called? Harm reduction, kind of, like someone getting off of heroin by using Suboxone. Like, I understand stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But there's a certain mentality that comes from people who have no clue what addiction is like. And they're like, well, he said he just needs it because it helps him through the day. It's like, that's what addiction is,
I'm like, whereas like I'm in rehab, everyone's like fighting with my girlfriend trigger sheets and like, and I'm like laundry, emails, doing homework, cleaning. It was just like an ADHD list of like, why crap work, and like that. Yeah. But it's nobody on the board is an addict. And then like our one teacher who quit the day after, like submitted grades and then quit, was LGBTQ affirming, but also was an addict in recovery. So I'm like, and she just affirms and affirms. And I can understand that would be so hard for you. Yeah. Like in terms of like how we should, it was like, none of it was addressed towards people with addictions. It was like, we're going to start calling them this. And it's the stigma that's preventing people from getting help. It could be the fact that Colorado has like 0 28-day Medicaid programs. Could be one of the reasons. Pennsylvania had like 30. New York had, I think, like 10 or 15. Out here, they have none. So it's like, okay, and that's why they're not getting help.
There's like this mentality as well that there's something artificial about the stigma around addiction, as though it's like, some patriarchal force of whiteness has created this mentality that drug addiction's a bad thing, and that's why we stigmatize. It's like people who are high or drunk behave differently. Like people like me, when we're not in a good place, are tough to be around. And a lot of times you lie to people around you. You might steal from people around you. You might pass out in public places. Like those are difficult things to deal with. It's not some arbitrary stigma. Like there's a reason why some of the stigma exists.
Right. And you can see that echoed throughout like in culture and a variety of different things, not just with addicts, but just different things. And it's like, for me, like if I was going to own up and say, like, what should I do? I'll gladly be like, yes, I'm a junkie. Please don't call me anything but, because I want everyone to know, or any like buddy that I meet, like, do not bust out. Like, don't bring cocaine to the mom party. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, don't like if I start acting weird and I start like kind of dodging you or whatever, I want you to know that like I'm in recovery. So that could be a reason why I'm being weird. And like I have a son, so I'm like, somebody, if I was using, I would hope somebody would be like, you go to treatment or call CPS right now. Or something like that. And they just keep trying to kind of like diminish like addiction, especially now. So like in 2018, like a fentanyl pill, like an Oxy Blue, like a fake one, it's like $40 in Colorado, in New York. Now it's $5. And in San Diego, it's 25 cents.
What?
I told that to my husband. He like stood at the sink and was just like closing his eyes. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like thinking of all the ways that I could still get high and still provide entirely for this family and be amazing. But
that is nuts.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like, so it's like becoming an even more and more and more and more like problem. But like then they want to take it from addict to substance use to this, to that, to whatever, just like to make people feel better. No, making people feel better is not going to get them clean. Like, it's just not. And like when I worked back in Pittsburgh, like I could say kind of whatever I wanted. There was nothing like, there weren't these rules. You're not something like an anti-Semite, racist, misogynist, blah, blah, blah. But I had like a 0% AMA rate because I would like take somebody into a room like who wanted to go AMA. And I was like, bro, your parents aren't talking to you. You don't have a cell phone. We took your cigs when you came in. You got 3 pairs of clothes, no shoes. It's middle of winter. Your family lives 2 hours away. What are you going to do? Like, there are tons of people that would die for that bed. What are you going to do? You want to go? And they're like, I'm like, okay, so go put your 5 articles of clothing back on the shelf and just be grateful that you're here. And like, that's all you really need to say. But the fact that therapists were passing them on to me when I was a nurse, I was like, what's happening here? Like, you're the ones that are supposed to get people to not go AMA. It shouldn't be me kind of yelling at somebody in a room being like, great, I'll gladly admit somebody else. I got a wait list at the door. That's fine. But like, no tough love allowed. You have to be and no addict wants to hear professionalism. That's just my opinion.
I think a lot of this stems from like a hijacked and warped form of empathy.
Yes.
Because there's like this mentality in a lot of the therapy, mental health, helping professions where it's like, the client or the person concerned, they're always right. Their intuition is right, kind of thing. And if you're dealing with addiction, that's just not true. I had a good buddy of mine. He was a heroin addict. And every time he ran out of money and was going through withdrawals and got sick, he would come to his mom and he'd be like, Mom, I'm sick. I just need to get through this. And she'd give him money for heroin.
Yeah.
Like, that is not real love. Like, that is hijacked empathy. And that is what so much of this social justice stuff is, where it's like, if you are refusing to tell an addicted person a tough truth, you are hurting them. Even if it feels like you're being nice, you're hurting them.
Yeah, you're damaging them beyond belief. But if you try to bring that up into the classroom, oh, no, which I've never experienced before. Like, I didn't even know what social justice was. I had to Google it because I was like, what are we doing? But yeah, you're literally damaging them by enabling them. Like, so my husband is a great example. He was an addict for about 8 or 9 years until we met. And his dad would go drive him to cop. I'm like, my parents wouldn't take me to the trap ever. Are you kidding me? They would kick me out, lock the door, call the cops. I don't know what they would do. They would never be like, okay, before we go to rehab, we'll hit up Freddie. Like, no, they wouldn't do that. But like, there's so many parents, and that's, I think, what keeps people in the cycle addiction. Like, my husband's amazing right now. He's the COO of some company. He's making a ton of money. He's doing amazing. And he'll also have like 5 years in February too. But it wasn't until like he moved away from his family. So like he moved to Buffalo and then we moved to Colorado and did that like enmeshment start like separating. And it's kind of like they were just, yeah, they were enabling. And that's kind of how I see like therapists today is like, why are we enabling people's like delusions or what I was the key of intellectualizing everything. Well, I only use this because of this, and like I could probably do this, and like everybody else is just that. I'm not.
It's
I
your
mean,
truth.
yeah, like it's my truth. Yeah, I didn't do it. I can stop whenever I want. You guys are just mad. The only reason that this happened is because I went to work hungover on Seroquel. The only reason I'm here, even though my drug test popped like ding 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 ding.
So you mentioned that until pretty recently, you didn't even know what social justice was. I'm wondering if you had some kind of political awakening, if your political views have changed, or if there was some kind of like aha realization around what this is, or what I like to call is your villain origin story. How did you move away from the right side of history?
So like so since my son was born, all I've been doing is like reading Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell and Alan Watts and you name it. Just go on and on. So when I got back to school, I was like, stupid, number one. But I think it was really like, I didn't really pay attention to politics ever. I've never voted except for this year. And it was because I'm in this class where I'm reading, like, I don't have my textbook right next to me, but like Black America, 7 pages of what we've done to Black people, 2 pages of how we can help. What? And then when Kamala was kind of voted, I was like, this is funny. And I thought everybody would think it was funny, right? I wasn't aware that like half the country thought she was legit or like I was like blown away. So like, and like my best friends from like high school and college, I'm like sending them like Kamala memes and they're like, oh yeah, well, you know, I'm like, whoa, I thought everybody thought she was funny. What? I had no idea that it was this like different kind of thing. And then I started paying attention more and started like, because of course, like it just so happened to fit perfectly with what we were learning, right? Like, or what we were learning, in terms of stuff. And I like, was just like, oh my God. Like, first off, I didn't know there was a George Floyd statue.
In
Like,
Colorado?
no, I don't know where it is, but it exists. The fact that it exists blows my mind. And I did watch like Candace Owens documentary. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, yeah, I saw that.
Greatest lie ever sold.
Yeah.
That was like part of it. But on top of like learning about, I mean, history from like my husband's obsessed with World War II, specifically the Pacific. So I watched everything on that and like learned everything on that. I could probably give you like the island hoppings that they did. But like learning that a lot of our history was like manufactured to propagandize, to do this, to push this agenda. And since I had been out of school for 4 years, I didn't realize what agenda they were pushing at the moment. You know what I mean? I was like, what is this? And like us trying to be like, well, if you're constantly talking to somebody and like this victim, like you can't do this and you can't do this and you can't do this and you're going to be racially oppressed and you're going to have this. I was like, this isn't how I would like empower somebody to be like, no, your race doesn't matter as for shit. It doesn't matter. And and that wasn't really a problem in Pittsburgh. So Pittsburgh was like 50-50. Actually, it was probably more Black people than white people. So it all kind of, I know you can't use the word colorblind today, but you were colorblind. Like everybody was. It wasn't like, you know, and then coming out here, like now I find out colorblind is not allowed.
It's white supremacy.
We're all just people, not allowed. I'm like, what? Then what are we? If we're all not people, what are we? Using the word Black. And then I would go and ask Black people straight up. I'd be like, do you not like being called Black? And they're like, no.
What are you talking about?
You're Black.
Yeah.
Like my babysitter, well, she's kind of like our pseudo grandma, is Black. She's like the only Black chick I could find in Colorado. And she's got 2 grandsons. And we don't have any family out here. So my son, who's autistic, like those are his cousins, right? Like those are, you know. And I'm like, she's from Oregon. And I'm like, do you not like being called? Because I'll just ask her anything. And she's like, well, I'm older, so I like to be called African American, like because I'm old. She's like 62 or something. She's like, but black is fine. Like, and then it wasn't like, and a lot of people don't identify with African American. Like, they're like, that's so far behind, but it's like they want to keep bringing it up now. Like, there's some agendas that they're bringing up over and over again that I'm like, when did this start?
Like who is in this, smoke-filled back room who's deciding all these things?
Yes.
Like this is the appropriate language. We didn't ask or consult anyone. We just decided it.
Yeah. We just decided we're going to have 70,000 genders. You're going to have to memorize them all. And here's a paper on why you're white privileged and describe how you are. I'm not white privileged. I was living behind a dumpster for a couple days. What are you talking about? But like, and then I'll ask too, like, because a lot has gone wrong in white culture too. Like, they're always comparing the numbers to white people. Obviously, there's a higher percentage of us. That makes fine sense. But what's going wrong with white culture in which that people are using drugs? Like, we should learn that too if we're learning cultural things. And I asked my teacher, like, hey, why don't we learn about like, because a lot of it's fatherlessness, a lot of it's culture issues. Like in Pittsburgh, black and white people kind of the same. They have the same culture kind of vibe. Which is why I loved it. It was just the best city. But he was like, oh, you've been learning that your entire life. When I asked, like, why aren't we learning what's going bad? Like, what's going wrong in white culture that's leading to white people using drugs at exorbitant rates and overdosing at exorbitant rates. And he's like, oh, well, you've been learning that the rest of your entire life, so you don't need to learn that in this class. I'm like, what? No, I haven't. What are you talking about? No? Because I came from a pretty, like, upper middle class family. Went to school, got in no trouble, blah, 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 and then drugs. So, like, what is going on in the white population that's causing that? Why aren't we learning that as therapists who most of our patients or clients will be, like, white? So I think I was like, why aren't we learning like what is going down? And then especially in like black youth, they didn't talk about fatherlessness at all, which pissed me off like so much. And I'm like, how are we not talking about one of the most fundamental things? Two-parent household.
It's just ignoring the elephant in the room.
Yeah. And I was like, that's the most ignorant thing I've ever heard. And walked out. It was like the last day of class because I was like, say bye to your job.
Yeah, it almost feels like regardless of any other circumstances, you could be like black and a person who has no like ancestral connection to slavery. Like your parents were like oil executives in Nigeria and you're oppressed. And then you could be some dirt poor white person from Appalachia and you're privileged. And there's like no conception that might be off.
Generational wealth. I'm like, I didn't get a part of that generational wealth, so do I classify as a white person? Because, like, what is this? That's, like, their main argument is, like, generational wealth. And I'm like, who has generational wealth? Like, I don't know anybody. There's maybe, like, 3 people I know, like, distantly that their families are wealthy. But I, like, personally don't know a single white person that has generational wealth.
Yeah.
Or anything like that, like, which drives me crazy.
Yeah. So, you talked a little bit. And I just want to see if I can connect the dot here. For me growing up, and I'm wondering if it was the same for you, if you were rebellious or transgressive or the type of person who uses drugs, even if you didn't have strong political views, it was kind of assumed that you were on the political left, right?
Yeah.
The idea that you would, smoke weed even and vote Republican, like that's, that would just not happen. Or if you're the type of person who like enjoy being transgressive or offensive, you were just definitely not a Republican. Like you were just kind of assumed to be Democrat or at least on the left. And that seems to have completely flipped in recent years. I'm wondering if you've seen anything, in that regard.
Yeah. I mean, I think, to be honest with you, a lot of it has to do with religion coming back. With like, especially Christianity is really like making this comeback. I love Jesus. I'm not necessarily Christian, but I fell in love with Gnostic Jesus first and then went to love Jesus. And Carl Jung was a Gnostic, so obviously.
Yeah.
And he's my man. But I also see it a lot across like the black community currently, which is why it was bothering me so much in this cultural class that I'm like, we're not learning, this isn't true. Like you're Mexican and there was one half black chick in our class who like, he literally made cry. Like made her go into a mental breakdown for like 3 weeks because of like how much he was like pushing this, your oppressed narrative onto her, even though she's half black, was adopted by white parents. So she like doesn't have any of that kind of connection, but I felt horrible for her because it's just not the kind of stuff to see. But I do see in the Black community, like as you see like the younger kids, like moving more conservative because of what culture has done to women, what's done to men. And I think like, especially within Black America, I'm seeing more people being like, we're not oppressed. We're not that. Stop speaking for us, white people. Stop virtue signaling. I think a lot of it, especially with addicts. So it's like if you go to like AA or CA or anything, and you really stick with the program for at least like a year or something like that, uh, it gets you at least starting thinking. A lot of people might have a higher power going into it. I really didn't. I just kind of like assumed like, okay, there is one. I don't care. Whatever. Just, I need to stop. And then like I made the coffee for a year, right? You're supposed to. And did the steps and like, step 11, I was like, it's spiritual awakening, I guess. Like, but I didn't. But I think like that was like a good intro to like, especially for addicts and stuff like that. Like they just like no addict wants to remain an addict. Like maybe the first like 3 months, maybe the first week, but when you still have money. But I think a lot of people just like identified more with a lot of people who are addicts who are in recovery were like, stop the fentanyl coming across because it's only a short time before, it's in front of me or something. And like, if I only have 90 days, I'm like, I look at everybody in early recovery right now and I'm like, how are you doing it? If you can go buy a 30 for $5, like, how are you doing?
Yeah. And it's everything. I mean, all 50 states, marijuana is kind of de facto legal.
Yeah.
Because there's these like slight variations that you can sell. And I'm hearing like sponsees talk about how you go into any gas station. I see it in gas stations, selling, they're saying like, this is way more powerful than the illegal stuff that I was getting. It's just, it would be such a tough time to get sober. Definitely.
Well, in Colorado, like Texas weed is illegal.
It's technically illegal, but like I said, it's basically legal because these different variations, you can get as much as you want.
Yeah, so there's that like Delta 9 thing.
Yeah.
That's bad. That's like what I think that's what they're talking about more so when they say like this is horrible, like way stronger or way whatever, because those are what started popping up in illegal states. Like in New York, you could get it on the reservations and stuff before they made it legal. And here in Colorado, I mean, weed's legal everywhere. But I honestly think like everyone's like, weed is a gateway drug. I think weed is a gateway to drug dealers if it's not legal. Because like no dispensary is like, I got some Molly and some cocaine. Do you want some of that while you're buying this eighth or anything like that? Like that doesn't happen. So our parks look really nice because of all the weed money. I think it's always been harder for an alcoholic. Like before weed was legal, I'm like, how do you just live? How do you go into a gas station? How do you do anything? Because it's not like I'm finding crack everywhere, except when that snow salt comes out. I'm like, if I was using, I would be, you'd smoke this stuff.
I don't know how I feel about marijuana legalization. I spent many years as a libertarian who was like, legalize it and everything.
Yeah.
And I recognize there's some downside, there's some harm to legalizing it. But at the same time, when you make it illegal, like people are going to look for something. I don't know if you remember back in 2012, I got hooked on spice. I was on probation. I couldn't smoke.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
I couldn't smoke
like once and I was like, never again.
Yeah, I couldn't smoke actual weed. I got hooked on spice. It was the worst thing ever. It was 1,000 times worse than actual weed. And I was doing it because, weed was illegal.
Right.
So you have these consequences, whether it's Delta 8, 9, 10, all this stuff. People are going to find something that's probably going to be worse than what you're trying to ban.
Right. And they're also like, I didn't know this until I went to rehab in Texas, that like it's a felony to get caught with like anything, any drug, even if it's like an empty cocaine bag or something with like a little drizzle in there. I was like, it's a felony? There's no drug court here? What's going on? But like I met like 3 girls who were like 22 and under that all had felonies from having like a gram of weed or something on them. So I don't like necessarily, I know everyone's like, oh, we should throw drug addicts into jail. And I'm like, I think we should put them in drug court, or they have to come like in New York, you had to come every week, every, and you're also in IOP where you're getting drug tested constantly and they're reporting it. And they're like, okay, as long as you do a year of this and you report to court and you do IOP and you pee and it's clean and whatever, then it'll be gone. However, if you mess up, sorry, charges back. But you're right. Like if people can't, like first off, if you're in a state where legal or weed is illegal, who's selling it to you? Probably the most dangerous people on earth. Maybe there's that one weird dude in like one of those drug rugs, but mostly, especially out here, it's the cartels, like people you don't interact with. People also have like bags, like think of the biggest gallon Ziploc bag of just like bars. And maybe like
I feel like the sketchiness of your dealer is very much related to what you're buying. Like if it's just weed,
yeah,
you're like, hey man, what you need? But like every cocaine deal I've ever done was super sketchy.
mm-hmm. Super sketchy, and especially being a girl, they all want to hang out with you. I'm like, I don't want to hang out with you. I want to buy my drugs and I want to go in my room by myself, alone, away from everybody, and I don't want to interact because you guys are all climbing up. I have ADHD, so like it just made me like sit down and read like textbooks, like, and then I had like carpet crawling, and I'm like, oh my god, and they would like go smoke a cig, and I'd vacuum. Now like, it's all gone. And they're like, and then they still keep cloning through it. Like they were just ruining I'm like, I'm trying to do homework here. Stop.
Yeah.
But I will agree though. It's like, if you can't find, you're going to find something. It's going to be something. And if it's not going to be weed, it's going to be booze, which is, in my opinion, 1,000 times worse. And I think it's a lot up to like the parenting too. Like I like out here, like at 21, you could smoke weed. I would rather have anyone smoke weed before they drink. But that's just way worse. I've seen too much with alcohol. It just destroys you. But it's like, and I've also seen the Suboxone scam, right? Like, so when I worked in Buffalo, what they would do, so when I worked in Pittsburgh, they would do a 4-day Suboxone taper. That was like the first day was every 4 hours, next day was every 6 hours, whatever. They got X amount of doses per day. And as long as they were 4 hours apart, bingo, up 2 milligrams. Then when I went to Buffalo that had a detox and then upstairs had a rehab, they would give a Suboxone taper that was 2 milligram, another 2 milligram 6 hours later, and then 2 milligram the next morning or something. And that was it. And then about 6 hours later, when the doctors came in to start doing their H&Ps, they're like sick as hell, right? And then they're like, would you like to be on Suboxone maintenance? Who wouldn't say yes? Yes, I would. Okay, sign here that says that you're going to complete with blah, blah, blah when you finish up. Otherwise, you're supposed to blah, blah, blah. It's like was the biggest scam. Everybody that was in there was on at least 8 milligrams, twice a day, 12 milligrams, once a day, 8 milligrams, 3 times a day. You name it. I got 2 people. That's it. 2 out of all the patients I had to not take the Suboxone. I was like, trust me, you're going to have to go back on dope to get off the Suboxone. Like, that's just how it goes. Like, you could cut it into little tiny ass pieces and even this much, and you're still going to be sick. And that's like most people I know end up like getting off Suboxone by going back to heroin, which isn't even heroin anymore.
Yeah.
And then detoxing off that because it's easier than subs. Coming off of that. It's like a month long.
It's wild what's going on in the opiate space. I've met several people, 2 or 3, who said they were for years IV heroin users who went to like either smoking or snorting because it was too strong. Like they could not use it at all without overdosing. Up until recently, I've never met anyone who went from IV back to
snorting. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just
unless you don't have veins. Unless you don't have veins.
Yeah, you blow out all your veins. Yeah. No, it's the fentanyl thing is just, I mean, it is wild. It's just killing people right and left.
Yeah, and it has
I've lost
like
so many friends.
What I've heard is no legs. So it lasts like maybe like an hour and a half. You feel dope sick for a while. And the thing with Suboxone, so with fentanyl, it has like various, since it's made in like China, different labs, it's got various alkaloids or analoids or whatever it metabolizes into. There was like 20 of them. They can stay in your brain, in your system for like 2 days, but you're not high. You're sick. You're sick as hell. But if you were to give Suboxone before that time, they're going into precipitated withdrawal. Hard. And I would tell my patients, I'm like, dude, you just used like 6 hours ago. I'm like, or like 12 hours ago. You don't need, you will die. You will throw up and there's no way you can override 12 milligrammer. Like there's just no way. Like you don't have any money anyways, so you couldn't break through that barrier. And they'd be like, please, I need it. And I'm like, okay, but when you start puking and you start getting upset because you're going through precipitated withdrawal, I don't want it directed at me. You can come and ask me for Zofran and stuff, but like, I told you so.
Mm.
It happened so many times.
What do you, in your opinion, you mentioned 12 steps. What do you think is the best solution to addiction?
What Carl says, a spiritual.
Jung?
Yeah.
That's what Bill said too.
Yeah. Well, Bill got it from Carl.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Well, he got it from that other dude that went
William
back.
James.
Yeah. And he was like, Dr. Young, you must help me. And he's like, you're a lost cause. Go back home, put yourself in someplace spiritual or religious and hope for the best.
Yeah.
And like, and so like you had, I think it was Roland Age.
Hazard. Yeah.
Yeah. He was the one. And then he came back, joined an Oxford group. Then
Yeah.
Bill and like,
Maybe Thatcher.
and so I like the 12 steps, but I think it's really dumbed down.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of other literature like this is one of my favorite books.
Oh, interesting. Carl
Yes.
Jung. Very interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and it goes through 12 steps, the hero's journey. It goes through what they call it. It's like the philosophy of, I don't know, some Eastern philosophy that because they, in the East, they see addiction as an attachment problem, which I'm like, it is. And so that's fascinating. It just goes from like the start to like how it became. And like, when I started reading Carl Jung, I was like, it sounds exactly, but better than, but exactly kind of like what the 12 steps was trying to go for, the spiritual awakening aspect of it. And then I used to like go to meetings and I'm like, all I would see was ego. And I'm like, where's everybody's spiritual awakening? What's happening? But I was like that for years until I, had a seizure.
It's so hard for me because I think like you stumble into parts of recovery where there's so much more depth, whether it's literature like you're talking about or certain old timers that have just a much deeper conception of recovery and spirituality. And I think this is so amazing, but it would be so hard to turn that into a system where everyone could adopt it. Because I think like in terms of cognitive ability, emotional depth, willingness to put in the time. A lot of it, you can't make it widespread. So you have to, in some sense, dumb it down and make it to where everybody can get these little bite-sized pieces in hope that they can get something bigger later on.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think my obsession of going back to school is when I learned attachment disorders and like how they manifest in adulthood. And that stuff. So like you got the insecure versus secure. So like anxious, avoidant, fearful, and then these alleged secure people. I don't know who they are. I don't know what they do.
Yeah.
But if I had spent 28 days learning that, like that's like 80% of my unconscious.
Wow.
Like that's how it's when I started learning about it, I'm like, how do they have cameras in my house? Because it was like when me and my husband were kind of going through some trouble, we went to a therapist who sided with him. So I was like, wait. But I stumbled on like attachment theory, like integrated attachment, like later, not just Bowlby and back in the day in the Crying Kid or whatever. But I was like, oh my God, this explains everything. I felt like I was reading, what does Kristen do exactly when she's triggered? What does my husband's name's Nathan do exactly when he's triggered? Why are we confiding? I'm like, oh my God, this is the answer to everything. And this is like, and it parallels back to your childhood and all of that stuff. But of course, as you said, like you need somebody who's like willingness to change type thing. Like, I think it would be really beneficial. I mean, most people come in rehab, they've been there before. Somebody who's like been around the program, kind of knows, kind of doesn't, kind of knows, whatever. But like to hook that, to kind of just give them information on like, hey, read this. What does this sound like? Like, does this sound like you? Do you resonate with this? Yes. Check. Like almost doing like when they intake, you have to do all those stupid forms or whatever. Like doing an attachment, there's a few that are like approved, scientifically approved to discern your specific attachment system. And I think like bringing awareness to that, because that is like the biggest thing that we're not aware of. Like I had no idea. Like I thought I was like this stoic person who didn't have any feelings, and like everybody else was crazy because they were all like emotional and like, and I would think I was the better person because I would like keep my emotions at bay and reject, disown, deny all of them. And then I had a seizure, like based off of repressed emotion. So
really?
Like a psychological, non-epileptic seizure. I had two of them. I had one in like January of 23 and one in August of 23. And when I thought the first one, fluke, The second one, I was like, then when I looked up like PNES, like what causes it, I'm like, oh my God, I have to start feeling now. And like, that was my dark night moment because I could no longer, because I didn't like use drugs to escape anything. I used it to like, I got off my ADHD meds and thought it was a good idea because I told people to quit their heroin all the time. And I was like, well, why can't I do the same? And I was in my first year of my doctorate and I was like, what a great idea. And, but then I got introduced to crack and I was like, I felt normal. I was like, oh my God, I'm back. Wow. Whereas like everyone else, like peeing out the blinds looking for the feds. And I'm like
Crack's a hell of a drug.
yeah, I was just like now H&Ps and all this other stuff. And like, for like, so
How do you do that on, like, I can understand doing that on, like, powder cocaine because it's, like, a little bit longer effects time. But crack, as soon as I would take a hit of crack, I would need another hit of crack. I don't understand how you're being productive.
well, it was like at the start, right? So
Okay.
like this was back in the, like, so when I first started smoking crack, I could literally get like 150 chunk, put it away for Thursday. Like when I had like,
Wow.
crazy, right? Like now
It's
that's
like Olympian level
right. Now I
addiction.
look at pictures of like Hunter Biden's crack pipe being like, oh my God, how much is a push isn't there? Because like, he's not pushing it. So I'm like, what if we stumbled on Hunter's old crack pipes? Like how much would be in there? Just be like yellow all around the side.
Yeah.
Well, like that's for like I guess my ADHD is so bad that it was like, zing, I could focus. Everyone was like, I wouldn't be talkative. I wouldn't be like, I would just be like, great. And then like read a text. I would be reading my psychopharmacology textbook, like for fun. Even when I was not in school, I was like, yeah, this is fun. So that's like everyone's like, I think that should be the ultimate psychiatrist test. Here's a hit of crack. What do you do? What do? You sit down? Like everyone's claiming they have ADHD now. So like, what do you do? What happens? Do you sit down and like, or are you like all over the place?
Yeah.
Because that's like the definitive answer. If you sit and you're
You
quiet,
couldn't do a placebo-controlled study because you would know if it was a placebo or not.
yes, you would absolutely know. Yeah, but you
Yeah.
have to put like the same kind of like flavoring into it with the chore, metal.
Yeah. So I want to try to tie together a few different threads. I think we've agreed, you've fleshed out how the social justice movement has created a lot of problems culturally across the U.S., not just in programs like ours, but culturally and also psychologically. And also you've talked about people who've resonated with you are like Carl Jung, Joseph Campbell, attachment theory. How would you apply those psychological and philosophical concepts that have resonated with you to fixing our culture and, I guess, mass collective unconscious, if you will?
Well, I can start with one. So like for Carl, like for readings, when I started reading Jung, like I really didn't have too much of an opinion on the trans thing. Because I wasn't really paying attention and I didn't realize it was affecting. Once it started affecting kids, then I was like, oh, hell no, But like before that, I was like, meh, whatever, you're an adult, do whatever you want. And like, but then I started reading, so this is about a year ago. And I was like, you're failing Earth School. Like you're failing. You're supposed to balance the feminine with the masculine. Like in Jesus says, the two become one. Like that, it's repeated all throughout mythology, all this stuff. And I'm like, they're missing the point. You can't just switch genders and become like you failed. You didn't balance. There was no balancing there. So I think like and you know what? Carl Jung gets a bad rap because he was with Freud. He realized Freud was a complete pervert and was like, I need to get away from you. And like half of his lectures, like his lecture books, I have like 3 pages of why he doesn't like Freud and why he no longer wants to be associated with Freud. Don't put my name with his. But Freud was still like nobody found out Freud's history till later. So Carl Jung was dismissed, called a mystic, blah, 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 even though I think a lot of the stuff is right. And I think that we see right now is this massive identity crisis, whether you're Black, like this, that, trans, not, I don't know. It's not helping that like our schools are straight indoctrinating this. Like I didn't even know. Like that's why these kids that are coming out of college already have this perception or this thought or this like ingrained white guilt or ingrained hatred towards white people or whatever, because I guess for the last 4 years, that's what they've been learning. And I'm like, there's a book called How to Be Anti-Racist. What? And I was just so confused. And like, so I think though that a lot of it has to do with like knowing who you are, knowing your identity. And like when your identity is kind of up in the air, especially during puberty, or especially when you're getting pushed one message from your community, then you go into this like, I don't know what to do. I guess I'll just become this and this will work out for me. And like you see it not just in like you see it in every culture. Like if you all of a sudden, if you're, I've heard countless stories of if you voted for a certain person and you are a part of this certain race and you're now excommunicated, nobody wants to talk to you, you're called all these names, blah, blah, blah. If you yourself are trans, but you're against transing young kids, you're kicked out of the trans party, you're not invited, we hate you. And I'm like, this is insane. And I think like a lot of the division reminds me, sadly, of Mao Zedong's color revolution. It's almost identical because the people that were cheering for this crazy change were what? Academics, scholars, professors, those people. Those are the ones who have these like the experts in the field causing this, like chanting for this. And the rest of the people who weren't educated, maybe not literate, maybe not whatever, were just like, okay, well, but that's what turned it into comedy. And I think we kind of we're starting to see that. And it's hopefully not.
And you have struggle sessions to enforce that doctrine.
Yes.
Which we see a lot of. I love how you framed it as an identity crisis because, I think a lot of what we see politically, with identity politics, but also it could be latching on to Donald Trump or latching on to, I feel like there was less enthusiasm for like Joe Biden, but Barack Obama as a hero archetype,
or Elon right now. That's like
Elon, AOC, JD Vance, like whoever. You have this kind of hero archetype, and whatever inadequacy or something missing in your own life, you kind of channel yourself through them and see like, I'm a hero, I'm successful, I'm fighting the battle of justice or what have you, because I'm imagining myself through that person. So that's kind of interesting through that like Jungian archetype perspective.
Yeah. And I think it's too because we've been lied to from the media forever for, I don't know, well before we were born. And I think people are starting to wake up to that now. It's like nobody knows who to trust, but there's some faction that I think everybody still is like trusting one half, trusting another, but they are like attaching like what the future will look like for themselves based off somebody else. Like not their own identity, not what they are capable of, not what blah, blah, blah. It's based off of, oh, this person can do it. And what's interesting about Carl Jung when he was talking about the National Socialist Party, like rising up in Germany, is he believes that Hitler ditched his own ego for the collective's ego, and the collective also ditched their own ego for the collective's ego. Like, so they, like, whatever they wanted didn't matter, but it was like collectivism. And we were kind of going down this collectivism path towards the left ideas. And now it's like, towards the right collectivism thing.
Do you feel like there's a risk of something that's basically the mirror image of the left developing on the right? You hear people talk about the woke right, but some possibly identity politics, but, some type of like mass hysteria, that creates like almost a cult-like groupthink. Do you think that's occurring on the right now?
No, I think there's a lot of fighting on the right.
Okay, so the opposite.
It's the opposite. I think that they're like, we like a lot of the Democrats and stuff will say, it's a cult. No, a lot of people are mad at Elon right now. A lot of people on the right, like their trust it has to do with really one group, but their trust in Trump is like kind of wavering. They're just like, they're hoping, but like, it's like, Elon's getting a lot of hate right now. They haven't even brought up Tulsi or RFK or anything like that yet. But like based on the last, like, he's not even in office and we're still like, we're fighting. So I don't think it's a cult.
Do you think like kind of the infighting on the right, I feel like the Trump MAGA coalition, has been very much able to keep that coalition going because they were not in power. And basically you just had to be kind of anti-woke and anti-Joe Biden to be a Republican or anywhere near the conservative coalition. And now they're about to take over all three branches of government. You have to start governing, actually. A lot of these divisions are becoming very noticeable? Do you think that's going to cause any kind of fracturing?
Well, I don't think so. I think we should I think all of us, because I was freaking out for like 5 days. I'm like, oh my God, everything's going down. Everyone's like, oh, Trump plays 5D chess. No, no, no. Trump plays Rainbow Road chess. He is like, that's what he's doing. And I think right now he's causing all these narratives and this and that and whatever, just to keep it like he knows he's a master of the press, right? So like when he was divorcing his first wife, they like both teamed up with like a different tabloid and we're like, let's see how far we can push it. And and he realized how the media worked at that time. Like, all press is good press kind of thing, or how to scramble narratives or how to distract people. And so I think that's what's going on with like, I mean, I think there's some validity to it. Like, oh, Greenland, we want some of your minerals. How about we make a trade or some kind of thing? I don't think we're going to buy Greenland, but I mean, we'll see. But then you have people that are like just jumping to conclusions with everything that he says. But I started to get worried because Elon is a little too close to the greater state of Israel. I was like, oh God, Trump's going to be like that too. It's going to be the same thing over and over. And I'm like, we got some hope. And then we bait and switched. But then Trump re-truthed like 2 days ago, a day and a half ago, Jeffrey Sachs talking about how Israel caused 9/11 and how Israel causes all the wars and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, is he noticing? And then I didn't realize that when Trump lost in 2020, that Bibi Netanyahu went and congratulated Joe Biden first, and that pissed Trump off so bad. And for me, the last person I would ever want to have to place revenge on me is Trump. Sorry, like I'm not interested in that. And so but I think he has to do it pretty coyly, but there's so many narratives. There's like Muslim grooming gate. I'm like, what is happening? Like, why are we focusing on like the UK, Canada, this, that, whatever else? But I think it's all a distraction. And I don't think there's one thing that could probably fracture like the thing, like from what I'm seeing right now is like, we just gave $8 billion more to Ukraine, but that's Joe Biden. So whatever. Or not Ukraine. I'm sorry. Israel, we gave 250 million to Ukraine again after our $50 billion loan like 2 weeks ago. But I think that, I rewatched The Art of the Insult. Have you ever seen that?
No.
It's Trump, and it just goes through all the times, like from his 2016 onward campaign of him like bashing like whoever. And it like kind of reignited hope. He's like, I don't need money. I don't have any money. Look at all donors are booing at me because I don't need their money and blah, blah, blah. But I think I do see though that there's a lot of DEI institutions like at Iowa State, gone. Florida State, gone. They switched it to so gender studies no longer exists. Diversity no longer exists. It's like social and cultural, and CRT is not allowed. And gender ideology is not allowed. And I'm like, really, that's all I care about at this point in time. That, taxes, maybe. But I think a lot of it is just like stirring commotion, wondering like who's going to react, who's not going to react. How's this news nation going to react? How's this news network going to react? I just think he's playing Rainbow Road chess when it comes to the media and what he's putting out. And it's funny because that repost of like that video where it says, Israel called 9/11, they dragged us into war in Iraq. I have this fantastic documentary where it has the media receipts of like Bibi Netanyahu in 2001 being like, you really need to attack Saddam. You need to go into Iraq. And all of a sudden it's like, well, Iraq didn't bomb. Is there any correlation between Iraq and I think it was Syria or somewhere, Saudi Arabia? I don't know who they originally placed the blame on from that passport they found, but nobody talked about it. Like nobody was posting about it. Nobody was like, it wasn't in the news that he's sitting there condemning Bibi Netanyahu. And I think it's interesting, like just to see it play out. But I think a lot of people are noticing Israel's influence on us. I think a lot of people are just kind of waiting to see, are questioning some of the people that are around him, like in terms of like what agenda are they going to like kind of whisper into his ear? I remember Megyn Kelly saying that like once Trump got elected, she's like, he's an amazing man, but he's very prone to like ass kissing, especially by like very influential people. Like, so it's like, I think we just got to wait and see.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember in undergrad, I took a Middle Eastern studies class, and one of the books we had to read was called The Israel Lobby. And it was interesting how much outsized influence, that they have as a country, and not all nefarious, just kind of, a lot more influence than you realize, I guess.
Yeah, well, every Congress member has an APAC minder. So like they pay for most of Congress's elections or senators' re-elections. Of course, as long as you like ally or you lobby for Israel, as long as you're pushing Israel, pro-Israel stuff first. And the only one that doesn't have one is Thomas Massie, who people were calling him a traitor because he didn't want to vote for Mike Johnson. And he's the only person that like will not let it like Israel and APAC, which is it's an acronym for something like that.
American Israeli
something. I paid
Affairs
for
Committee.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
they have like, and it's funny, you look back when JFK wanted them to register as a foreign agent, he was killed about 2 weeks later. And like since then, it's kind of been the same. So it's like everyone has an APAC minder. We're now all realizing like Israel dragged us in like into war after war after war to fight their wars for them. And then none of us, like nobody is really standing up to the Israeli government while they're doing whatever they're still doing. But I don't think MAGA is a cult. Like I think there are a lot of people that are on like various different sides of things. Whereas that's what the left will say, like they're a cult. They all believe Trump. They all believe Elon. It's not even like we're infighting, but we're having these, and they'll call it infighting, but we're having like conversations about what's more important. Like we ran with America first. Why is it going to be Israel first? Like that shouldn't be happening. Or like the whole immigrant thing. Like, and I think that was just to stir up shit. Like, I think really they meant to reform it, but they like phrased it horribly and made it sound really bad. And it kind of just echoed, be like, oh no, we're America first. But we don't really know. I mean, he's not even in office, but you do have a lot of people like disagreeing with Trump, agreeing with Trump, disagreeing with Elon, like that kind of thing. Like, whereas the Democrats all had to be like toe in line. You all believe the same thing.
So I've got one more question for you before we end, and that is, we talked about a lot of stuff today, so there's probably a lot of different directions we could go with this. What is one thing that we're not talking about that we should be talking about?
Fatherlessness, the lack of fathers in the home. Like, I think that should be the number one. Like, and you've heard like Vance say it and like Vivek say it, but it's not like echoed in like literature. It's not echoed in what we're being taught. It's not like all I had to do was like search, how many drug addicts or people that become drug addicts grew up in a single family household. So that is a main factor for a lot of different, like not having 2-parent households or dads not leaving, or it'd be okay for dads to hit it and quit it and just leave and just never come back. And like that's causing, if you look at how like women, like young girls, young adult women are like kind of acting, behaving, this OnlyFans crap. Where's your dad? Where's your dad? Because he wouldn't be okay with this. And so like you can kind of see it in a lot of the blue-haired liberal, blah, blah, blah people. Like, where's your dad? Besides, if you did have one, you cut him off because you voted for Trump. But like, I think fatherlessness in the home, especially different, it's affecting. So Black communities that went down and whites like right behind it in terms of that. And so I think that's one of the biggest things that we need to talk about is like parenting, because our fatherlessness, and parenting in general, because like these kids right now are a disaster, going through identity crisis. They're all freaking out, like in terms of whatever. They're all being influenced by whoever is speaking in their ear, music, this, that, the other thing, comparing themselves on social media. And I think it's just a massive identity crisis that nobody's talking about. It's like they're trans, or no, there's only 2 genders. But like, why aren't we speaking about like the identity crisis that's manifesting in a lot of these things? If that makes sense.
No, that was a great answer. It's a fascinating answer. If you could just stick around for just a minute until we finish uploading. But this was a great conversation. I loved it. Very illuminating. I appreciate it.
You too, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you.